Hey, welcome to the AspieCast. I'm Stephen Michael, and this episode is something that I got kind of excited about from a email that I received by someone asking for solutions. I thought that was an interesting one. And anyways, just to rehash, in case anybody's listening to this episode for the first time, AspieCast, the goal of it is just to show some info. I shouldn't say show because this is audio. To give info that sort of just says the kind of things that I've experienced, and that's because I feel like I've benefited a lot from learning what other folks have experienced as Aspies, and of course realizing from that I'm a hell of a lot less defective than I assumed. I never knew the reason for all of my social interaction deficiencies and pain and whatnot. So anyway, I've covered that a bunch of times probably. So actually two things that I got incoming from emails. And by the way, these are not the only two great things that I've had coming in. There's just a lot of really intense, wonderful emails, and I definitely want to respond to as many as I can. And just because I didn't respond to yours doesn't mean that I don't think about it and want to do that as soon as I get a chance. I am totally stressed with work, but that seems to be my normal mode of operations. Anywho, so this episode is totally unrehearsed and unplanned, and I just wanted to mention something that, so again, that two people had sort of mentioned as topics or ideas. One was a comment that there's a recurring theme of me having a lot of shame. And I would say that must be right. And I didn't even sense that this was actually the case. So that's an interesting thing, that I must be, exuding stuff that I don't even know about just in my talking into a microphone. And it's a trip because maybe that's an Aspie trait. I would assume it is. At the same time, it's probably really true because, as I get older, I get more and more understanding of all the interactions that I've been through that resulted in, I would say, almost tangible things that have stifled my life. And that's not the same as shame. That just means that these things have been social interactions that I now know were pretty bad. They went totally against me without my knowing why or how. But at the same time, I realize now that I probably upset, a large number of people, or made them feel bad, and or made them angry, and most probably not want to be around me. And so that's the stuff I feel ashamed, and maybe I feel frustrated and sad and jealous that it had to go that way when it didn't go that way for everybody else out there, according to what I was always thinking. But it's a lot of this stuff is on my mind because I see a relative who I almost am certain has Aspie traits, which is a cautious way to say I think he's an Aspie. And of course, I haven't brought this up, and I haven't even brought up the Aspie stuff within my own family, just a teeny bit. But I did have a family gathering recently, and I saw interaction between different branches of the family, and this one relative who I'm discussing is probably an Aspie. And it's a young relative, mid-20s. And so and the other folks that he was interacting with at this family gathering were also mid to late 20s. And everybody, present at this gathering was, extremely successful, intelligent. And by successful, I don't mean rich. I just mean respected and, really good things in their future. A lot of really unique, interesting insights on things and how their profession, operates and all that stuff. So a lot of great stuff. So I'm watching this other relative interact, And I'm seeing stuff happen that I think I didn't know was happening before, just barely. But I think probably anybody would notice this, except I don't think this particular relative did. Okay, and I apologize for using this particular relative over and over. So maybe I should say TPR. So TPR did not catch something that was so freaking obvious to me when I glanced over, and I kept glancing to see if it was what I thought it was. So TPR was talking and talking and talking about a particular subject that was kind of unique. It's a kind of hobby subject. It's kind of, imagine comic books or something like that. Imagine if you're a fan of Spider-Man and you went on and on about Spider-Man, and it was a totally sort of a one-way conversation, and it was just an ongoing recitation of great things about Spider-Man, etc. And so I saw this happening at another table at this gathering, and the table had these two other relatives, similar age, and they were basically turning their heads and looking towards other family members. So he was facing them and talking. Two of them, were not looking back at him, as if they were part of the conversation. They had, after some time, turned their head, leaned back in their chair, and started looking away from him. And it was like the biggest signal that they were tired of that conversation, or it wasn't even a conversation, it was just him outputting information as if he was in a conversation. And I just thought it was really interesting because he had no clue that that was a signal that they were not interested. And it was like this, big, bright, red flashing light for me when I saw it. And I believe people have done it to me, and that's sometimes the only way I've noticed if somebody's not interested. I've gone on and on and on in my past and not realized that people were not interested. But then after a while I said, oh, wait a minute, they're like leaning back in their chair and looking elsewhere and sort of sighing and stuff like that. It's like there's some subtle signals that they're given that they're tired of hearing me. And so the interesting thing to me was, how come he didn't catch on to that? It was just interesting. And I think it was just because he was so interested in what he was saying. But the other two factors there, and I'm just saying this in case anybody else, wants to know more details. His voice is, I guess you would say it's lacking prosody, so a little bit of monotone. It's also, the volume is quite loud, and the nature of the voice is quite harsh when you hear it. And it's really hard to describe that. But the loudness and just the tone or the sharpness of the voice, if I had to describe it, I would say loud and sharp. And it kind of hurts to hear it. And he would have no way to know this because, he's just talking and thinking that he's in a spot where he can interact. And of course, everybody, including him, wants to enjoy, conversation or just interacting with others. That's always been my thing, regardless of the failures I've had interacting with others. That was always my want, right, to interact. So TPR, it was just interesting to see TPR keep going and just not sense this. And eventually it did stop. But here's the reason I'm bringing that up. First of all, I started realizing this because I don't see TPR very often, maybe once a year. And TPR, in general, doesn't ask any questions in a conversation. TPR only says knowledge that TPR has, or discusses things that TPR feels are important. So there's no asking of others, what am I trying to say? Hey, that's cool, what else about your job, involves this kind of technology or something like that. Any kind of like conversation that he might be interested in, there would be no interaction. It would just, it just wouldn't be there. The conversation is only him talking if he's involved. Now, the trippy part is there's a very opposite part of that, which I really can't stand to see because I've done it. A lot of this stuff I can't stand to see because it reminds me of what I've done. Let's say TPR is meeting a relative, after several years, and that's what I saw. TPR is like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, awesome to see you. Right? And it is so, I didn't even do it well enough, but it is so phony to hear that because it is not anything like all the other interactions that TPR has at the dinner table or on the couch with people. So again, this very canned greeting, as if there's some excitement there. But then you get into the conversation time later on, dinner table, whatever, there is no interest in the other person whatsoever. It's just a overly loud, harsh, sharp spewing of, personally interested information, such as, everything about Spider-Man. And in this case, it's not Spider-Man, but it's something like that, I guess. More recent stuff than Spider-Man. Okay, so it's also awkward because, here's somebody who's mid-20s, and that's a time when you get the chance in life to make connections that help you going forward in your career and your social goals and, just the things that people help each other with to get further in life. And that's one of the things I realized is that a lot of folks that maybe my contemporaries, similar age, they moved further and faster in the areas of life where I wanted to go, partner, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, job, move up the ladder, corporate ladder. Not everybody wants that, including me. That can be painful just because of the nature of organizations. But and having kids and all this stuff, just all these things that life can be about. Those opportunities never came up for me because I was doing the same stuff in my 20s, which is causing people to sort of overall in general look away from me and not feel like interacting with me for more time than they really needed to. And that just prevents any, enthusiasm on their part to mention a small little thing that could propel me forward in some fashion, like, hey, I know so-and-so who's really into Spider-Man comic books and they're thinking of starting a store, would you like to connect in case you can offer any suggestions? All those teeny tiny little things really are sometimes the primary fuel towards moving forward in life. It's amazing how many things that, I'm sure everybody listening knows that, but so many things depend on teeny tiny, accidental, spur of the moment things that carry forward in really good ways. And okay, so I'm going to get a little bit more into this idea of like, could I give solutions? So solutions to some of the problems that I see. And this one's interesting. All those teeny tiny little things that can propel you forward in life, those seem to happen more often to the folks that are out and about and making connections or interacting in ways that cause other people to be enthused and feel good when they are around you, the Aspie, let's say, or you, the person, Aspie or not. And so the solution in this case, it's really awkward. The solution is to figure out how do you get people enthused about interacting with you, and where do you go to do that? And it's kind of weird because I'm giving questions when I'm saying I'm going to give a solution. So give me a second here to parse this in my head. The idea is I think that the more you open yourself up to possibilities, the more good things will happen. And the opening up of possibilities to get these small little things happening and that could result in good things over the long term, you just have to be interacting with people, as many as you can, as often as you can, etc. And sometimes this happens in bars, and that's sort of unfortunately how it went for me when I discovered that I could get people enthused talking to me. And then I also discovered later on that I could get really, really bad results, because it felt so good interacting with people. I wanted to get more and more time in the bar, and then that just got out of hand. So the solution, here's the issue with that. If we say that the solution, in this case, of being stunted in life with regard to, marriage, kids, family, home, job, whatever, a solution of, being more connected, more out and about, having more interactions with more and more people, that's really hard to do if you're an Aspie. So, because of, how do you do it? Where do you go? I always needed rules. And I couldn't understand, why would people even want to interact in that way? I didn't have the energy or desire to go and meet somebody after work. I was worn out from my 8 hours at work or 9 hours at work. I didn't want to go have, beer with the people I just spent 9 hours with. Well, gosh, the amount of stuff that happens after hours that if you're not there, you're going to get gossiped about anyways. So, so the question is, an Aspie, if they're like me, wouldn't even get invited out a lot of the time. So here's actually my solution, believe it or not. If you can get the right job with people that are not restrictive in who they deal with, who are just interested in interacting with people of all types. If you get the right type of job and you do a good job, they will invite you to lunch or after work drinks or whatever. And it doesn't mean you have to have beer, by the way. But I guess what I'm saying is, it is possible to find a job. So let's say you're just out of college, or you're in college like I was. If you get the right people around you, you can actually make a lot of progress. Now, I did that, but I didn't do it with my peers. I was doing it with the older folks that were my job, I don't know what you'd call it, seniors and stuff like that. So there was a disconnect there, because if the job had been with, more people of my age group, I might have made connections there that would have been a little more successful. But I did get a little frame of reference on how people out there connect. So even though I wasn't connecting with people of my, peer group, I was connecting with older folks that had permanent jobs, whereas I was a student or an intern. I got the understanding that a lot of interacting with people in social ways occurs because of the job, and it might be over lunch, going out to McDonald's. It might be after work and having a drink somewhere. So that was the frame of reference I got there. Now here's the other tidbit. I would say, to do that, get a job that is more blue collar. Don't go into some networking or laboratory or whatever environment where people think too much. You want to get a job where people are more about doing a good job and bringing other people into the equation of whatever method, just because they know that's how life works. You help people and good things happen over time. Other folks, if you go into some technology firm, everybody's trying to do the best job they can, but it takes so much mental effort on their part, on everybody's part, that they don't necessarily care as much about all the connectivity that they could engage in while they're doing their job and after their job. Example is, let's say you're a technology person working on some complex digital marketing. You might have to work 10 hours a day just to get to accomplish some of the stuff that you never know how long it's going to take to do it fully. Well, if you go into a more blue collar job, then people know that they're not stressed. They're going to be going through the motions of their job every day, and after 8 hours, 8.5, 9, whatever, then they go out and have a drink, and so it's almost like a lot more guaranteed that you can start getting a frame of reference there by just being a job. So that's my suggestion. That's sort of a very minimal solution. It does only apply to folks that are sort of starting out in the job market. So that could be, mid-college or whatever. For me, I was too freaking scared to get any kind of job because I knew how painful it was to interact with people. And the pain was because I would do things and it would just be negativity coming back at me. So I wanted to go hide my head in the sand all the time and not even think about getting a job. But eventually, I did have a passion, found a job opening that was accommodating somebody as an intern, like that was an okay person that didn't have to have experience, but also had a real interest in this particular thing. So that could be as simple as, if you're interested in comic books, you go find a opening for a mail clerk at a printing company, or some whatever. So I would say just keep an eye out there. So that's a long way to say that if you can get a blue collar job, you might be great. The only thing is you got to be careful, because in the blue collar world, there's less attention sometimes to some of the issues that Aspies might be more aware of, because they can connect issues that are socio-political, economical, and stuff like that. And so if you're an Aspie, you probably don't want to get into that stuff, because that can separate you as some kind of outsider, because a lot of those folks either don't like thinking about that, or they've all been swayed by the wonderful folks at Fox News to think in only one way. And I've had, the one thing I will say is, all those folks that have been swayed by Fox News are some of the most wonderful, honest, respectful, wonderful to work with, well-adjusted people I've ever worked with. I think that's amazing, because if those people didn't have Fox News blasting bullshit in their ear all the time, the United States at least would be a hell of a lot different. Because they are so much more respectful and trusting, and Fox News figured out how to approach that audience. Okay, that's my rant on that. But anyway, all I'm saying is, if you can get a blue-collar job, don't get into being an Aspie with regard to, trying to connect all sorts of dots, but just watch how people interact, learn. You don't even have to say anything half the time. They'll be joking with you. And you could even just say, hey, I'm going out to get a tea or a cappuccino. Do you want something? And I found the hard way that I would just go out and get my own cappuccino, and then I started getting feedback like, damn, you're like one-way Steve. You don't want to ask anybody if they want anything? Thanks a lot. So that was a semi-subtle, obvious, joking, half-serious way to say, why don't you ask us if we want something? Okay, so people aren't going to say that, but it's great. Blue-collar environment, you might hear it straight to your face. It is absolutely great for Aspies. Absolutely great. So I recommend that. Now, the other thing that relates to, do I have a solution for something? So I just described TPR and this interaction with the relatives. And I also know that relatives talk about TPR when TPR is not around and say, why is he so odd? And for me, I see it as Asperger's immediately. That's what I see. It has all the check boxes. They're all checked. But a lot of folks don't even know about Asperger's. They just think, okay, TPR is fairly odd. And it can be painful to interact with TPR just because of the harshness of the voice and the length of time that he goes on about stuff that nobody gives a damn about. So the thought is, what would be the solution for somebody mid-20s to learn that it's going on? Because none of the relatives feel like they would ever want to hurt him, so they wouldn't say anything. So he's stuck. He's doing stuff. Nobody's telling him. So he keeps doing it, not knowing that there's anything awkward, odd, different about it. So I don't have a solution for that. I just don't know. And, I would say that folks listening here who are parents, if you're not Aspie parents, or you see this stuff, you're in a much better position to convey that information. But I think even if you're not Aspie parent, but you've sort of watched this person grow up, next to you every day for 25 years or whatever, you may not even be aware it's going on. I don't know. Because I think that's where my parents weren't aware, because I don't know. End result, I don't have a frickin' clue how this person would find out what's going on, other than waiting and just observing over 20 or 30, the next 20 or 30 years of his life, that opportunities didn't arise for him that did arise for other people. And looking back, say, what the heck was going on? And then somehow finding out that all these things were happening when he was 25, 21, 20, 15, that's the solution that hit me. Unfortunately, it was all way too late in life, and too much expense on, drugs. And by drugs, I mean Paxil and Lamictal. And those are good. Well, I take that back. I don't want to endorse any kind of drugs, but they helped me. So if somebody has a solution there, let me know. Nobody is going to tell this person, TPR, what it's like to be in a conversation with him, and how they probably don't want to be in a conversation with him if he continues doing what he's doing. That's just not going to happen. Guaranteed. That's a fact. Nobody feels comfortable enough to get into that kind of conversation, especially when they meet him once every 2 years at a family gathering. So what the heck do you do? How can that be solved so that he doesn't isolate himself and learn all this stuff 30 years later? No idea. So feel free to send me a message. Okay, so that's my stuff for now. I was just kind of intrigued by what I saw, and the idea of, maybe there's solutions out there, or could I give solutions? And I'm going to keep trying to think about that in future episodes, so that, if I can come up with solutions, I will. And at the same time, I'll say, hey, what the hell should you do if somebody is going to be doing this stuff and it's concrete, guaranteed nobody's going to tell them, including his parents? What do you do? What is the solution? I wish I knew what it would be. I wish I knew. Okay. Thank you so much for paying attention. And as always, feel free to email me, AspieCast@gmail.com. And I will definitely read everything that comes in. And if I can fit in time to reply, I will do that. And again, thanks for listening. And I'll hopefully talk to you the next time around. Thanks.